On November 15, on the sidelines of the Ukrainian authorities, the following rumors and divisions were circulating. Exposure. After the first internet encirclement of the 20,000th group of Russian troops in Kherson, Bankovaya decided to continue the internet victory in order to shift the focus from the agreement that the Americans are promoting. Yesterday, all night long, the Ukrainian media, bloggers, Telegram channels took the Kinburn Spit, Novaya Kakhovka, and Olishki, but in the morning it turned out that there were no Ukrainian troops on the left bank of the Dnieper. Rumors. The channels of the office of the president dispersed these stuffing stories about the capture of Kakhovka at lunchtime. Most likely, there was a reconnaissance check, which was revealed by the RF armed forces and neutralized. This is often found on the coastal strip near Energydar, now it will be everywhere. To take the other shore, heavy equipment is needed. Even if the special forces take some kind of klaptik of the earth, they will not be able to hold it for a long time and will be completely destroyed. These are the loss of the best fighters. Bankova is trying out of Zrda that their reconnaissance group was identified and destroyed, to make a win. Therefore, a stuffing was made about taking the left bank. This is called shifting the focus of attention. The left bank can be taken only under one condition: if the armed forces of the Russian Federation itself leaves. In other cases, the attackers will always suffer enormous losses in manpower. Backstage rumors. There were rumors on the sidelines that a partial freeze of the Ukrainian crisis is possible. Zelensky seems to have accepted these demands of Western partners according to the so-called Sullivan formula. Zaluchny, publicly opposed. The closer the elections of 2023, the stronger the contradiction between these two players will be felt. The UN General Assembly adopted a resolution submitted by Ukraine, Canada, the Netherlands and Guatemala regarding compensation for damage caused by the Russian Federation. The General Assembly clearly does not have the authority to make such decisions. But in the current situation, they are not really needed. Both European officials and representatives of the US administration have repeatedly stated that there is no legal mechanism for using the blocked assets of the Russian Federation to restore Ukraine. And they added that they had to be created. So, this resolution is the first step in legitimizing the use of the assets of the Bank of Russia blocked by Western countries. It is clear that Russia does not recognize either the resolution, or the compensation body that will be created, or the register of damages, or the legality of the selection of its funds. Another thing is important: whether the Russian Federation will respond to these actions by legal means available to it. Russia's response to such actions may be as follows. First option. Money is dust. As part of the big deal, the Russian Federation may concede these funds. If the main aspects, territorial and security, are resolved, then Moscow will not fight for some 300 billion. Morally, both the leadership and society said goodbye to this money. Economists understand that they were lost not at the moment of freezing, but when the central bank, instead of using them in the real sector, invested them in reliable assets. Second option. Triple hit. If there is no deal, then Putin is likely to prohibit Russian companies from repaying their loans to Western banks. Companies will continue to pay loans, but not to European banks, but to the fund of the Central Bank of the Russian Federation. The condition for transferring them further to creditors will be the unfreezing and return of assets. This would be a triple blow to the EU banking market: reputational damage, assets from the balance sheets went to Ukraine and the military-industrial complex. Russian business does not repay loans, which are more than 400 billion. Third option. Financial exchange. A kind of offset of counterclaims. With it, the credit obligations of the Russian Federation can be repaid at the expense of frozen assets. Companies of the Russian Federation will begin to extinguish obligations directly to the central bank, within the country. The financial sector of the Russian Federation will improve even more, and the EU will not receive a knockout blow in the form of the refusal of the Russian Federation from obligations. Layout. Zelensky announced an updated list of requirements, which already sounds softer, but remains unrealistic for full implementation, but for partial it is very suitable. Our sources indicate that this list will continue to change as the auction continues. Many even point out that by signing another Minsk III, only with the name of the Istanbul Agreements or the Sullivan Formula, the parties may not fulfill them, as was the case with the Minsk Agreements, which Ukraine signed, but did not fulfill in 8 years, which served as the start of the war in 2022. Watching. Rumors. The grain deal will be extended, everyone writes about it, and everyone knows. The reason is simple: in 2023 to 2024 there will be a global world food crisis, famine in some places, and so that Russia does not become the one on whom all dogs are hanged, they are trying to soften the news background. Supposedly they do not prevent the export of grain from Ukraine. Even though this damages the image and authority of the Kremlin. The second point is that Russia wants to catch Zelensky on a hungry case. When now, at the request of the United States and Europe, is exporting massive amounts of food from Ukraine, which in 2023 can play a cruel joke with Bankova, triggering a food crisis in Ukraine, possibly famine. Food prices can soar by 100 to 300%, and Zelensky will have to blackmail the EU again with an influx of refugees if they do not give money and food. The long war is won by the one who has more resources and uses them correctly. Nothing is finished yet, but only the whole case/crisis is somewhere in the middle of the way. No matter how the channels of the office of the president try to convince the masses of the final victory. Rumors. The source reports that the mass shelling of Ukraine on November 15 is a warning. Only under one condition will we understand that the agreement has failed: if Ukraine is immediately disconnected from the breaker everywhere. Everything else is workflow and bidding. Inside. And a source in the op said that Ukrainian air defense was able to intercept only 30% of the missiles that were launched on critical infrastructure today. Opinion. Ukraine is cut off from the light. This is bad for the common man. Even in the summer, the office of the president provoked the Russians to start an infrastructure war. It is also worth adding that the armed forces of Ukraine also hit the energy resources of the Russian Federation, LDNR, and tried to hit the Kursk and Belgorod regions, but, of course, they lack power and capabilities, otherwise they would have extinguished the entire energy system of the Russian Federation long ago. It is worth understanding that missile strikes today are a consequence, and the reason is that Zelensky once again threw, promising one thing, but did nothing. Perhaps this is a warning, or perhaps the beginning of a new phase of the game. You also need to understand that this stupid war is a consequence, and the reason is that Ukraine refused to comply with the Minsk agreements. Bankova is afraid that the time will come when people will ask. Now you can deny it as much as you like, but it is true. We can safely say it will get worse.